Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch today's video. I want to shift gears a little bit because we've been talking about all this stuff in the news and it's definitely worthy of attention and being aware of. And I'll mention a few things here in a minute. But the bulk of this video I want to make is, well, how to buy land, or really what to look for when you're trying to purchase land to homestead. Most of this will be based on my experience of living in the Ozarks most of my life and homesteading here for a long time. But a lot of these tips and stuff will be good for pretty much anywhere you move to. So we'll get to that later on in the video. Number one, there is one of the listeners here on YouTube. They're starting to or working on, I guess I should say, having their own local meeting, kind of like what we're doing here up in the DeSoto, Missouri area, which is kind of in the St. Louis area. I don't believe all the details of the meeting have been nailed down other than the place and stuff. But I just wanted to put it out there that if you live in that area and you're interested in meeting with other local, prepared homesteaders, you can shoot me an email and I will forward it on to the person that is starting to put this together. I'm not sure if I'll be able to attend or not, maybe, but we're still working on all the details. If you shoot me an email, please in the subject line, say something like, DeSoto meeting or something, so that I can separate that from the other emails that I'm getting. And you can email me at preparedhomestead at protonmail.com. That's preparedhomestead at protonmail.com. And hopefully we can get a group there. There are, I know of at least 2 other areas in Missouri that people are wanting to kind of put groups together. And then I'm getting emails from people all over the country that are wanting to either go to some type of meeting, be part of a group, or are contemplating starting their own. If you are in that group of wanting to start your own, and you have any questions, I'm not an expert, but I can sure tell you what I know. And then if you nail down a date, time, and place, I'll announce it on here for you. I'll promote your meeting as much as I can and try to get people to come to it. The stuff that's going on right now, it's crazy. I'm not talking about just Afghanistan, and that is a big just mess. Okay, it's a mess in every possible way. I do believe it's a planned and orchestrated mess. But that's not the point of today's video. But there's stuff everywhere. You've got China now saber rattling and doing live fire training off the coast of Taiwan, and then turn around and telling the Taiwan people that America's not going to come to save you, just like they did in Afghanistan, and then telling America you need to cut all ties with Taiwan, not do business with them, not sell them any arms. There's just stuff happening all over. The stuff here in America, New York is pretty much, on a full-scale lockdown, in the sense that if you don't have your papers, the proper paperwork, you can't go anywhere or do business with anything. Stuff is just the stuff coming out of Australia makes George Orwell look like a nursery rhyme. Things are getting crazy. But I just have something to say about all that. Don't worry, folks, because this is all part of the planned global reset. It's fine. Nothing to see here. It's all part of the planned global reset. And if you stick around on this channel, subscribe, or just watch frequently, we have videos on here all the time going into more detail about what I mean by that. Now, the meat and taters of the video. I get a lot of people emailing me wanting to either move here, move elsewhere. They're wanting to get out of the cities or suburbs, or they're just realizing that where they live is not a very sustainable place to live. So they're wanting to homestead. They're wanting to have their own piece of land so that they can grow food, raise animals, provide at least more security and sustainability for themselves and their family. And I get people asking me, how do we do this? Do you know of any places? Do you know a realtor? Do you know, all these questions. And so I thought I would put out a video on just my personal advice on what to look for when you're purchasing land. because you can still buy it. Prices have increased. I've seen them increase around here, and occasionally you see people around here. I saw one the other day that someone, it's obvious that they think, hey, you know, prices are up, let's put this ridiculous high price on it and maybe we'll get it. Maybe they will, doubtful, but their price was at least double per acre what anyone else around here was charging for, which is already an inflated price as compared to a year and a half, 2 years ago. You know, 2 years ago, you could easily buy just bare, plain old land with nothing on it for, you know, anywhere between $1,500 and $3,000 an acre. Right now, I'm seeing that between $3,000 and $5,000 an acre, but you can still get land below $3,000 an acre if you're patient and you look. But you have to act fast, because most of the information that I'm getting, and this is anywhere, this is not just an Ozark thing. A lot of these properties are selling within 48 hours of being listed. People are moving fast on them. But how to choose the land, that's important. I hear all the time, whether personally someone telling me, or I just read it in the news or on a post on some, you know, online group, of how many people that have purchased land with the intent of having some kind of homestead, and then finding out that it's a horrible place to be. Maybe the neighbors, maybe the environment, maybe the laws. It's you know, they end up becoming very disappointed. For prepared homesteaders, it's different in a lot of ways. It's almost like the standard of what we're looking for is a little bit higher standard. You know, the average person that's maybe just still asleep in the world, and they're just wanting to get away from the noise and the you know, the smells and stuff, and they just like being outside of town, but they're still connected. Their standard, or the bar of what they're wanting, may not be as high as what you and I are wanting, and I'll explain that. Location, location, location. You've heard that probably your whole life, and it's absolutely true. Look for things like water. Water is important. Now, if you're in the desert, obviously this may not apply to you, but it really should. I mean, you can still buy land down the Southwest in the desert, like out in Arizona, for, you know, it's super cheap. But there's no water, and there's no water rights. You can't even dig a well. Make sure you try to find a place that has some access to water, whether it's in the ground, whether it's a stream. Make sure the water's good. Fortunately, here in Missouri, in the Ozarks, you can dig a hole pretty much anywhere and strike water. Most wells vary between, say, 150 all the way down to 400 foot. And a lot of that depends on if you're up on the mountainside or if you're down below. But I have rarely ever heard of anyone in the Ozarks drilling a well and not being able to hit water. I know it happens, but it's not that common here. But the Missouri also has a lot of creeks, streams, wet weather creeks, a lot of springs, wet weather springs. So if you can find something like that on your property, it's good. And even if you don't have that, if the property lays in such a way that you could build a pond to collect water, that's also good. And there's so many hills here in Missouri, it's not too difficult to get a piece of property that you can, you know, put some sort of pond, and it doesn't have to be gigantic. And that's a good way to collect water. I know you wouldn't want to drink out of it, you know, directly, but it's water that you can treat in some way to make it drinkable. Then the next thing is growing. Growing food, and, well, growing or raising animals. In Missouri, one of the biggest complaints is the soil. It's not necessarily that the soil itself is bad, is that there's a lot of rocks in it. In some places, there's a lot of clay. There are areas that have good soil. Usually those are the valleys. So if you're in a valley, especially near some type of water, you know, over the centuries, water, you know, soil erodes down into the lowest areas. And so you can find places like that. If you happen to buy a place or are looking at a place that just doesn't have that kind of land, you need to be prepared to bring in soil for, say, gardening. I personally have owned a place like that. The land was beautiful, but there was no area that was really good for gardening. And so I had to bring in a few big truckloads of dirt. And when I did that, I had amazing gardens, but this is something that you need to plan for ahead of time. Same way with animals. Not every place has open fields. And sure, you can clear wooded areas, say like behind here, and make it a place for livestock. But you need to factor in how much money that costs, because it's not just going in and cutting the trees down. You're to really develop it in a way that you can grow, enough vegetation to feed the animals. You're going to have to, probably hire someone in to do some dirt work to clear that out, clear the stumps out, and then come in and have some seed put down so that you can have decent grass to raise livestock. Because if you just went in, like say where these woods are here, if I just went in and cut it all, yes, it's room for them to move around, but it's not really going to grow the vegetation that that cattle, goats, sheep, whatever, need to sustain themselves. I would have to have a lot of land because it's just not going to produce enough. Some other things, and this one, I should have mentioned this one first because it's huge. Check the laws of where you're moving to. Check the state laws. And check the local laws. It's really important. Number one, building codes. There's so many people. I saw something in a post, a homesteading group I was looking through yesterday, and someone, I think they own I don't remember where it was. They owned like 40 acres or something like that, and there was a shed on their property, an existing shed. And all they wanted to do was, move that shed to another place on the property. And come to find out, according to their county laws, they're not allowed to without, getting some type of inspection and plans filed and building permits. It's ridiculous. Many places you can't even put a doghouse or build a doghouse on your property without some kind of, restrictions. There are places that's not true. For instance, where we live, most of the Ozarks, most of the counties in the Ozarks have no building codes and restrictions. There are some, and those are the more developed and populated areas. These are ideal places to homestead. It doesn't mean that, maybe your intention is to hire a professional, construction company to build a standard, stick house to standards. But you want to be able to do what you want on your property. So I would advise looking for that. Now, there's a negative to that. That means that others around you may potentially be building a home or buildings however they want. And you have to accept that. For those of you that live in the Ozarks or come here, it's kind of funny. Sometimes you'll see like a big, beautiful home, $500,000, $1 million home on a piece of property. And right next to it'll be, some little cabin that someone's living in, the property adjacent to it, or maybe a mobile home or something like that. A lot of people don't like that. They want everything looking the same. They want, there to be kind of a standard in the area. But when you have that, then you're imposing laws and regulations on people. When you take away that standard, you can build whatever you want, but so can your neighbor, and you need to accept that fact. Now, when dealing with neighbors and you're looking for properties, certainly check out the area. If you found a property that you're wanting to buy, kind of drive around and see what's going on. Just because a home may not look like the standard that you want doesn't necessarily translate to those people are going to be bad neighbors. Yeah, sometimes you can, but I've had neighbors in the past that live in a nice home that end up being horrible neighbors. But certainly try to figure out what's going on. Anywhere in the United States, especially in the rural areas, you are occasionally going to run into people that do drugs, make it, sell it, use it. Occasionally criminal elements. Nowhere near in the levels as you're going to find in the city, but they still exist. So make sure you check out the area. Also, look at what type of agriculture is going on in your area. Is there a lot of corporate farming? Is there things like hog farms and chicken farms and stuff where they can pollute the area and just pollute the air and make it smell bad? I've heard of people, purchasing a piece of property, and then, a big hog farm company comes in and buys the place right next to them, and just a few hundred yards from their house is this big, huge, hog production. Of course, you can't completely guarantee that's never going to happen. But if you look and kind of figure out what's going on around you, it can give you some indication of what would likely happen in the future. So for instance, where we live, and in a big part, especially the central Ozarks, you don't see hardly any, if not, I mean, really any corporate farming. And the reason is that the landscape doesn't really support that. There's so many hills, and even though there is flat land, the flat land isn't a big area. And so, you know, you don't see a lot of big corporate crop farms, or you know, big, you know, buildings that, you know, like chickens and hogs. Mostly what you're going to find around here is just smaller, locally owned little farms that are running some beef and possibly dairy. And that's about it. There's a few places you'll see some crops grown, but that's about it. But again, you need to kind of be aware of that. And also the laws, not just building laws, but other laws. Look at things like homeschooling. Look at things of how, you know, how the state looks at people that live off grid. You know, is it favorable to that? Is there, you know, things in the news that the state has come down on people because, you know, they're collecting rainwater, they're not connected to the grid? Look at things like gun laws and other laws of just free living. You know, is your state seem to support that lifestyle, or is it try to fight against folks that are already living there and trying to do that? Then you can look at areas. Another thing to look at is the towns around you. What's going on in the towns around you? What type of businesses there are. You know, some people may want to have access to medical care, so they're looking for a hospital, and they do exist, you know, usually small community hospitals, occasionally maybe one per county. So look for that kind of stuff. Try to stop off at little local businesses, local restaurants, the local feed store, to kind of get a feel of what's going on around you. And then, you know, also look for people that are kind of living the lifestyle that you're living. It's important to see that, you know, hey, there's other people that they seem to be like a little homestead. You know, they've got a garden, they've got some sheep or goats, a few cows. They're not some big corporate farm, they're just a small little farm. Those are all also good signs. And then also look at things like tourism. Are there areas, you know, close by where there's a lot of big time tourism, little tourism? A lot of these little towns have little niche type things for tourism, and that's okay. But for instance, here in Missouri, there's Branson, Missouri. I would not want to live near Branson, Missouri, because it gets, you know, millions and millions of people all over the country every year coming there. Even though the landscape is beautiful, I certainly wouldn't want to live very close to Branson, Missouri. Other things to look at is highways. Are there interstates nearby that would, in times of disaster, whether man-made or natural disaster, being used to transport people or military or government? Or would it also, if everything just collapsed, be people traveling up and down that highway, maybe looking to loot or something like that? Along the same line of that is look for things like military installations nearby, government installations, certain types of infrastructure, like say nuclear power plants, that could be targeted or could melt down. You don't want to have that near you if you can avoid it. Trying to think of anything else. I had this written down, but I decided not to bring my list with me. Just take your time. I know some people feel so pressured right now to get out. I get it. You feel, and you're rightly so, that things are heating up. But don't buy into something too quickly without checking, you know, kind of the area and the land. There are places in the Ozarks that do have restrictions, but they're not restrictions from the county. There may be covenant laws. There's companies that'll go in and they'll buy, you know, hundreds of acres and break it down into 5-10 acre plots and sell it off. But then they have restrictions on what you can do, what type of housing you can live in, you know, if you can hunt or not, what type of, you know, livestock you can have. So also be aware of those things. But generally, if you're just buying from an individual in the Ozarks and in, you know, other rural parts of the country, certain other rural parts of the country, you're usually free to do what you want. But make sure you check on that. Check on covenants. If does that land have a covenant? Does that a covenant on land can go back, generations, and say that you're not allowed to do this on your land. So be aware of that kind of stuff. Do your research before you just pull the trigger on purchasing land that you're moving to survive on, because it's important. It's a very important decision to make. All right, folks. Thank you all for watching. Catch you in the next video.